Well, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome in to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7, 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion Los Angeles Sparks. Here tonight, folks, on the last day of September 30th, 2014. Good evening, everybody. Alongside Chris Romancy via Apple's FaceTime from the Annenhart Studios in Anaheim, California. Cal McClurg and his pet dog, Rodney, joining you folks here from Studio 171 in San Diego. Chris, I've been pet sitting for the past few days because my mom is not at my house right now. She's been with my grandmother taking care of my grandfather who just left the hospital a few days ago and out of rehab. So I've got the responsibility of dealing with the dog here during the show tonight. But other than that, man, wow, a crazy ending in baseball tonight, man. How's it going, man?
It's just, I don't know. I don't know about the Oakland A's. I don't know about this.
Now, folks, again, I know that we missed a few days of recaps because, of course, I was busy with my work schedule, and you guys probably heard that little scratching there, folks. Again, my mom has not been at my house the past few days, folks. My dad is home. He's sound asleep, so I'm in charge of the dog and the show here for the next 30 minutes. But, again, folks, my grandfather, who had a major, pretty nasty stroke earlier this month, was just got out of rehab and is back home and doing fine. But my mom wanted to be there, though, just to make sure everything went off without a hitch. So you'll probably, folks, see me kind of in and out of the frame for a bit because, you know, my dog's around here in studio. But, Chris, tonight here, man, as we go to our fourth night of WNBA seasonal recaps, man, recapping a season that was basically, Chris, a Cinderella run, Chris, for a team that was pretty much destined for greatness last year, but things just didn't fall into place. Now, folks, give me 1 second here, as I know I got my dog scratching at my door, so let me just let him out real quick. Please and thank you. And he'll probably be back in a few minutes, so we'll see what happens. But, Chris, again, getting back to the team that's on the schedule tonight, Chris, again, the Chicago Sky, man, who, after a year, man, that they dominated the league last season in 2013, and then this year started off hot, man, then boom, a flick of a switch, a snap of a finger, Chris. Elena Delle Donne goes out with her Lyme disease, and the team basically falters back to the face of the earth, man, finishes 15-19 in fourth place, the last possible playoff position in the WNBA Eastern Conference. But, Chris, they prove all the doubters, all the naysayers wrong and take the ride of their lives. The first time the team gets in the postseason, Chris, and they are the Eastern Conference champs, taking down Atlanta and Indiana. Chris, looking back at the postseason for Chicago, man, where nobody, no one in any city in the WNBA, Chris, thought the Chicago Sky had a fighting chance to do anything in this playoff run, man, and they turned all the doubters wrong inside out. They proved everybody wrong, Chris, that an underdog team that had to go through so much adversity during the season can come back, and they can come back and do what they did, Chris, and that was go all the way to the conference finals, Chris. And I know, man, that after the Sparks basically whitewashed them back in early June, that both teams kind of went up and down at the same time. But, Chris, as you look back at the Chicago Sky season, man, Eastern Conference champs, the first time they got to the postseason, man, and wow, what a fun season, Chris, it was for the Chicago Sky this season, man. Your thoughts about the season for them that was, kind of a roller coaster, man, but it led them to the promised land, though, but they just ran into that brick wall that was the Phoenix Mercury.
Just a great run by the Chicago Sky. Like, never give up. Came back. Just never give up, but ran to the NBA Finals, got a big raw, and just lost to the Phoenix Mercury.
Chris, the obvious point you go to in the season is, yes, it started off promising, Chris. Then, boom, like I said earlier, man, the snap of a finger or whatnot, man. Elena Delle Donne, their big puzzle piece, goes down because of her Lyme injury, her Lyme disease, Chris. And after her absence, this was a completely different Chicago team, man. They were, very disorientated, very discombobulated, a lot of big words, Chris. But it just looked like, man, that when this team played without EDD, they were a completely different team that, sort of going back to the cliche I said a while back about the Storm, Chris, they looked like they were chickens running around with their heads cut off, man, because they looked very lost in coverage. And Pokey Chapman, Chris, tried her best to get the troops back up, man, but it just looked like things weren't clicking when they didn't have their big center in there, Chris, in her 6'5" frame. Sylvia Fowles did her job, Chris. They got some, under the radar play from Jamira Faulkner and Jessica Breland. But Chris, how do you think, though, as you look back at Della Don's absence, man, she missed significant time. The team sort of tanked. Chris, how big of an impact, though, does the Chicago season have solely on Della Don's health this past season?
Like what?
How big of an impact did Della Don's absence have on the Chicago Sky season this year?
Very huge with EGD's absence, because got the Chicago Sky like 1 point very at the end in the last place in the East. Just battle to get into the playoffs, and just very huge.
Now, Chris, I think you kind of wonder why people are throwing you the bus, man, because you keep saying what? You're not paying attention to what's going on here, man. So that's why people are throwing you under the bus, in case you're wondering. But, Chris, again, it was a year, man, that, okay, we know that sort of went south for a bit because of the absence of Elena Della Don in the season. But at the same time, man, again, as a 4 seed, getting in there with the last spot, man, again, Chris, nobody but us two, figured that we would see the Chicago Sky get past round 1. They get past Atlanta, Chris, on a buzzer beater by Courtney Vandersloot in Game 2 to tie it up and then win Game 3 in Atlanta. They tie the series up, Chris, with a second left in regulation against Indiana in Chicago. They win Game 3 in Indianapolis, Chris, and then unfortunately, the dreams, the balloon pops because you face the best team in the league, Chris. But at the same time, man, nothing, Chris. I'll look at it this way, Chris. Chicago, the Sky, the players, the coaching staff, Chris. Chris, everyone tell me the Sky, don't hang your head, don't feel sad, because you guys pretty much intrigued a city that really has not shown much interest in the sport because of how big the Bulls are. But, Chris, I don't think there's anything that the Sky should sulk on. I mean, they took, a 4 seed. They were the first team with a losing record to get into the finals in WNBA history. And they basically, took their fans on this wild ride, basically, through 3 solid games in the conference and through the conference playoffs and on all the way to the, the league finals. And, it got away from them, of course, playing Phoenix. But, Chris, I don't think, man, that there is anything that Chicago should feel ashamed of. I mean, you did your job. You got all the way to the finals. You just couldn't finish the job because you faced a tougher team. But, Chris, looking back, man, is there anything that the Chicago Sky fan base, players, should they really be depressed about losing the WNBA finals, though, after such a great run that we saw this summer?
Probably not, since they got all the way to the WNBA finals. They didn't lose in the first round, like pretty much they always do. They got never give up, and they got to the WNBA finals, even though they got swept by the Phoenix Mercury. They just went to the WNBA finals.
Chris, I'll make this comparison, man, that the Chicago Sky season sort of reminds me of the 1998 San Diego Padres. Reason why I say that, Chris, is they won 98 games and won the division, Chris, but they were not favored by anybody but the fans in San Diego in the playoffs. They faced a very tough Houston Astros team. Yes, Chris, the Astros at one time were good when they had some guy named Randy Johnson pitching, Chris. They won 103 games that season, and the Padres beat them 2-1. Then they played the Atlanta Braves the next series, Chris, for the championship series, Chris. They faced John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, and Greg Maddux in the first 3 games, Chris. They go up 3-0, drop the next 2, Chris, but they beat a 106-win team in Atlanta. But then, of course, Chris, they lose to the best team in baseball, though, at the time, the Yankees, when they won 114 games. So, Chris, I look at the Sky season, Chris, like that 1998 Padres season because, again, they had a good season. But, again, Chris, not favored by anybody but their fans in San Diego to get past Houston, Atlanta, and then, of course, not favored to get past the Yankees. But, Chris, this, though, proves, man, that these underdog teams are not slouches like some underdog teams really are. Like, for instance, man, the KC Royals, man, who have not been to the postseason in 29 years, were down 7-3. They came back in the 8th, back in the 11th, and won the game in the 12th tonight to punch a ticket to Anaheim to play the Angels, Chris. Those are the teams, Chris, that no one cares about. No one says they have a chance. But, Chris, doubt they prove everybody wrong, Chris. So the Royals of this year, the Padres of '98, Chicago Sky, Chris, they're all connected in a fashion, Chris. So they have good seasons or bad seasons, and they get into the postseason, but they're not favored by anybody to get past the first round, Chris. What would you say about these underdog teams that we've seen across all sports, though?
Just very great to see underdog teams not favored by everyone, and just prove them wrong and win in the playoffs. Just prove them wrong.
Now, Chris, as we look back as we go back to the standings here, Chris, again, the Chicago Sky finishing the season again in the 4th spot. Again, now they were tied, folks, with the New York Liberty for the 4th seed. They both finished 15 and 19, but the Sky, by virtue of tiebreakers, got the 4th seed over the Liberty. Now, Chris, if you look at some of the other notes here across the storylines here for Chicago, mostly, man, I think we've covered everything, man. Again, Eastern Conference champions, in their second time in the postseason, they took, they had a great ride through the playoffs this year. But again, man, I think it was just more so, how this team just kind of flopped a bit when they did not have their big puzzle piece of Elena Delle Donne in the lineup. Now, Chris, we look at 2015, as we look at the draft order here, I want to say that the Sky have a pretty decent pick, I want to say. I don't have the numbers in front of me here, unfortunately, with that. But, Chris, I don't think the Sky really have to do too much retooling. I think they're pretty set, Chris. I mean, they were set because, again, man, they did have Sylvia Fowles, who was able to, try Brittany Griner, Chris, with her 6'5" size. But again, man, I think that they were basically doomed because of Delle Donne's health, Chris. As we look ahead towards 2015, Chris, are you expecting the Chicago Sky to defend that title of the conference title? I mean, could you see them going back to the WNBA finals in the future? Or what do you think is their current game plan right now for 2015? Because I think, Chris, I still think Atlanta has the edge right now for the conference because they've been the cream of the crop of the past 3 seasons. But I think Chicago's going to be 1 or 2 next season. Or they'll be a top 4, Chris. But I think Atlanta still, something about them still just seems to always say to me they're still the best team, Chris. Now Chicago's on my radar. They're going to be my number 2 team probably, or perhaps number 1, Chris. What is your outlook for 2015 for the Chicago Sky going forward towards next season in the spring?
Probably we'll wait and see. Probably, maybe the Chicago Sky probably go back to the mini finals, but we shall see. Because if they can beat the Atlanta Dream again, and we'll see if they can do it again.
Now, again, folks, the Chicago Sky finishing the season this year at 15 and 19. Again, they were tied for the 4th spot in the WNBA Eastern Conference. But again, by virtue of tiebreakers, got it over the New York Liberty, who, by the way, folks, we will talk about tomorrow night again. The New York Liberty are next up tomorrow night as we begin the first day of October. So we'll see if there's any Halloween spirit in studio tomorrow here, as it was with the pretty much flopped Spook Lounge last October. We'll see what happens coming up very soon. Now, folks, the upcoming forecast here for our seasonal recaps. Tomorrow, again, will be New York. On Wednesday night, or on Thursday, I should say, will be Indiana. And then on Friday will be Washington, pending any more things that pop up on my radar here. And I got to take time off here from the network because of some other things going on. Now, Chris, before we do break away here for FIBA, we're going to talk about the tournament real quick because the Team USA basically annihilated Angola this morning by a pretty wide margin. It looked like it was the Globetrotters playing out there, or UConn playing San Diego State perhaps. But, Chris, again, as we look back over Chicago, again over the Chicago Sky season, Chris, again, a year after, a dominating regular season, falling flat on their face in the first round, Chris, for this year, they gave teams a taste of their own medicine. They basically, did what Atlanta did in that last year, which was, beat them in the first round, and then so on and so forth, Chris. Again, looking forward, man, your last thoughts here about the, a season, Chris, again, marred by one key injury. It wasn't by ownership or everything's going on, Chris. It was an injury to a big puzzle piece, man, but they rebounded nicely, and they won their first conference title in their franchise's very brief franchise history. Your last thoughts about the 2014 Chicago Sky season?
Just a great season. The Chicago Sky went from first place to last place, but didn't give up. Got back to get into the playoffs, and then pretty much in the playoffs, never give up. Just they fought back, and went all the way to the WNBA finals, but just got a brick wall and lost to Phoenix Mercury.
The better team won that series, folks. And if you know me well, I did say Phoenix at the top of the preseason or the postseason pick. Now, again, folks, tomorrow night we'll recap a season for the New York Liberty, again, who also finished at 15-19, folks. Of course, folks, I look forward to all this, man. I look forward to, of course, doing all the recaps. But again, with that Liberty team, not too sure about that one. Now, folks, as we go break away here real quick from the WNBA side of the story, we will break away here for FIBA real quick, folks. Team USA on a roll over there in Istanbul, Turkey. Just a complete bloodbath game earlier this morning here on the Pac Coast against Angola. Team USA wallops them 119-44. It is a 3-0 preliminary round final for Team USA. It is the 75, and folks, and here's a quick stat for you, and this might make Chris perk his ears up, and he'll give me that Woodmansey stare, folks. The 75-point victory was the largest margin of victory for Team USA in the FIBA tournament. Boy, oh boy, Chris. I mean, Chris, we knew that that the tournament may be a cakewalk, man, but my goodness, 75-point victory. Not sure if this was UConn playing San Diego State or if this was the Globetrotters playing the Washington Generals, man. My goodness gracious. I watched the second half, man, and Team USA just could not miss if their lives depended on it, Chris. The entire play today was great across the board for Team USA. Now, folks, so I know we missed a few days here, but again, to recap the 3 games for Team USA in the tournament here, first, day one, defeated China 87-56 and beat Serbia 94-74. Then today, of course, Cloroxed Angola 119-44. The final box score in this game today from the game today, as I'm trying to pull up the box score here real quick from the contest here and the box score is nowhere to be found, so that's really helps me on here. But Chris, again, man, a pretty convincing victory, man, over a team that obviously Team USA should have beat. But again, Chris, thoughts about the 75-point win at all, man, or what do you got?
Wow.
I mean, Chris, it's one deal, man, that the Globetrotters beat the Generals every time by, 20 or 30 or 70 points. But Chris, I think, man, that this one, knowing, Chris, that this was a actual game, it wasn't staged with 4-point plays and penalty boxes and popcorn being dumped on the fans, Chris, like a Globetrotters game normally is. But other folks will be coming here in San Diego. They'll be coming to San Diego here on February 8th. They'll probably go into that too, just to go see the Globetrotters play. But Chris, man, it's a 75-point win, man. Is there really anything to really say about this game?
Nah.
So with the victories, folks, Team USA punches a perfect 3-0 record, and they will march on to play either France or Brazil in the quarterfinal game coming up in the coming few days here over there in Istanbul, Turkey. Well, Chris, I think we're going to be running out of time here real quick. We're going to be cutting it off pretty soon here. We've pretty much covered everything we had to cover tonight, of course, with our recap and some FIBA updates. But again, Chris, real quick, though, man, we will say it here that, let's see, today's Tuesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah, folks, we're 5 days away now from the launch of the brand new 24/7 365 comprehensive home of the NBA and the 16-time champion LA Lakers. That game, folks, will the tip-off of the Lakers Network, again, is on Sunday night, 9 o'clock p.m. on the Lakers 365 Network. And, of course, on Monday night, we tip it off with Lakers preseason basketball here in San Diego at the Valley View Casino Center against the Denver Nuggets. So, Chris, on the lasting note here, again, we basically have covered everything but the night, man. Everything that included you FaceTime calling me 50 times during the course of the baseball game while I was busy pet sitting my dog, to a game that, to a baseball game, man, that's going to live on for a long time with, a great game tonight over there, and with me pet sitting, of course, with you guys seeing Rodney at the top of the show, Chris. Out of all that nonsense, Chris, again, got through the Sky recap, Chris, and again, tomorrow night, man, the Liberty. Your last thoughts about tonight's show, Chris, and also, man, are you anywhere excited about talking about the Liberty tomorrow night, man? Your last thoughts about Chicago, and your bit of a preview as you go ahead and get ready to talk about the New York Liberty tomorrow night.
Where's me? I forgot now.
You want to regain yourself before more people throw you under the bus, dude?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Just never give up. Season by the Chicago Sky and everything.
Anything you want to say as we get ready to look ahead towards the Liberty tomorrow, man? Again, hey, identical records, Chris. They nearly snuck in there, but again, a couple tiebreakers didn't work in their favor, Chris. As we look ahead towards tomorrow, man, New York Liberty tomorrow night again, folks, 10 o'clock back here on the network again, Chris. Hey, they were pretty close, man, but again, pretty rough start. But your lasting thoughts as we get ready to move on to tomorrow night about the team we'll talk about tomorrow night, Chris, the New York Liberty.
There's kind of left down season by the New York Liberty, just like the Sparks, but didn't get into the playoffs.
Never is as good when you see the two marquee franchises or the marquee teams in any league have bad seasons. But with that, folks, we will call it a night here on the LA Sparks 365 Network. Again here, folks. Again, tomorrow night, New York Liberty recap tomorrow night. And then on Thursday, the Indiana Fever. And then on Friday, the Washington Mystics. Until tomorrow night, folks, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you all for coming, and good night. Now, this has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA, and we certainly are with WNBA. We will see you fine, folks, back here tomorrow night, 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 a.m. Eastern, talking about the 2014 season for the New York Liberty. See you folks tomorrow night. Bye-bye.